The live stream has started and it is 6 o'clock.
All right. 6 o'clock on July 7th, I will call the Middleton Finance and Personnel Committee meeting to order. Could we have assistance with roll call?
Yes, Madden,
Here.
Baines,
Present.
Crow,
Here.
all members are present.
All right. First item up is the approval of the minutes from our June 16th meeting. Anybody have any questions or corrections?
I have none.
If not, we'll accept the minutes as presented. Next up is audit of the bills. You had some additions, Bill?
Yeah, I have 3 additions this evening. The first is for Biblioteca. This is for the automated material handling system for the initial payment for the library. The dollar amount is $133,659.50. The second item is for Murphy Desmond for a payment for legal services on a claim for LaSilve of Middleton, $442.50. And then the final addition is to Plant Moran for implementation assistance with the ERP project for June, and that is $6,450. Then included in your packet are the AP bills to be paid as well as the June credit card bill or items.
Is there a motion to accept the invoice report and credit card report with the additions that Bill had added?
This is Madden. I'll make that motion.
This is Baines. I'll second.
Any questions on anything?
I did have this is Baines. I did have a brief question. There was one, I think, that said prosecutions on it. One of the bill items. I don't have it here in front of me.
Yeah, I think that would be legal services for the attorney that handles our municipal court prosecutions. That'd be Klemenski Law that handles that.
Okay, thanks.
And those we usually see each month or every once in a while?
They are billed monthly.
It is monthly.
Yep.
Okay. It's kind of a regular.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor of the bills with the additional amounts that Bill had added on, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We have a resolution 2026-27 budget amendment for the South Pond dredging project 26-116.
This is. Can I make a motion?
Yeah,
This is Baines. I'll move approval of the agreement with MSA Professional Service. Oh, sorry.
no,
Resolution. All right, I was already,
resolution.
yeah. This is Baines. I'll move approval of resolution 2006-27 budget amendment, South Pond dredging project 26116.
This is Madden. I'll second.
Okay. Bill, do you have anything on this? Just,
I can just note that this is just a budget amendment within the stormwater utility. It is increasing the appropriation for this project account from 75,000 to 95,000. The funding for that is coming from stormwater utility funds that are on hand. This is just simply to accommodate the higher anticipated costs for the project.
any other questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now we're on the agreement with MSA Professional
Okay.
Services for Confluence Pond Weir modification in an amount not to exceed $36,000.
This is Baines. I'll move approval of the agreement with MSA Professional Services, Inc. for Confluence Pond. Weir, is that supposed to be Weir or Pier?
Weir.
Weir,
Weir,
okay.
Yeah.
Modification in an amount not to exceed 36,000, 26-115.
This is Madden. I'll second.
All right. Any questions on this? Do we need any explanation? What is a weir?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we could, if, you know, Luke could address just the need for the additional, for dredging of the South Pond and maybe a little bit of why it's more than we originally thought.
Yeah, so I guess for the South Pond specifically, when we were doing the budget season last year, a lot of things were just carried over from our previous capital plan. We did only have one RFP respondent for this as well, so, I don't think it was an outrageous cost, it was just higher
Okay.
than what our estimate was. Confluence Weir, that's that concrete structure at the very end of Confluence Pond by Denning Lake. Essentially just ponds up Confluence Pond, otherwise it would just continue.
Okay.
And we're lowering it so we can get more flood storage.
Okay, cool.
Mayor and Ira?
I had a question on page 4 of the agreement. It refers to, it's paragraph B, MSA will attend one city committee meeting or the meeting with the public. And I'm wondering what that is a reference to.
For the confluence,
This is for, yep, for Confluence. Just the fact that it says the meeting with the public and not a meeting with the public makes it sound like there's one planned.
I don't think we necessarily have a meeting with the public planned for that project.
Okay,
That might just be a grammatical error.
okay.
Any other questions? All those in favor of the agreement with MSA Professional Services for design engineering services for project 26-115 Confluence Pond Weir modification, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And another agreement with MSA Professional Services for the South Pond dredging, not to exceed $84,377.
This is Baines. I'll move approval of the agreement with MSA Professional Services, Inc. for South Pond dredging not to exceed $84,377. This is 26-116.
Madden will second.
And any questions on this one? All right, all those in favor of the agreement with MSA Professional Services for design engineering services for project 26-116 South Pond dredging, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next up, we have an agreement with Rec Desk LLC for Parks and Recreation Management Software in an amount not to exceed $7,500, subject to city attorney approval.
This is Madden. I'll move approval of the agreement with RecDesk LLC for Parks and Recreation Management Software in an amount not to exceed $7,500, subject to city attorney approval.
This is Crowe,
This is-
I'll second. Questions on this one? Yes.
No, this
Alden.
is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is an annual agreement that we have with RecDesk, which has been how we book things through the park district for quite some time. Is that?
Yes, right
Okay.
now it's a 1-year subscription. We'll look at renewing it next year with a little bit or a slight change with an application that we're looking at, a phone app to
Oh,
add
okay.
on. So that will be coming in front of you guys in a year's time, or it's a March to March agreement. So
Okay,
ahead of that.
gotcha.
And my understanding is we haven't really had an agreement with them. We've
We
Worked
have
with
not
them
had an
before, it's
agreement
kind of-
with them.
right, so this
Uh,
is actually something new with them, right?
Yes, it's a formal agreement. We've been working with RecDesk for several years before my time with the city. We have been increasing over 25% of revenue on an annual basis for the last several years. So we've grown the recreation services and our revenue accounts, and we met the threshold, and there was a variable threshold of $500,000. Once we met that $500,000, we started getting a fee above that dollar amount that was charged at 0.75% of every dollar. So we got a bill this year, and I asked what it was for if we don't have an agreement. And so then it started the conversation of getting a formal agreement in place, and Matt has been a part of that process.
Mayor Haniron?
Thanks. Thank you for explaining. I was going to ask about the invoice discrepancy that you mentioned. How does the $7,500 compare to what we previously were billed annually?
We were invoiced this year $6,602. And we have that variable cost that was about $1,500. So very similarly to what we would have paid this year. And then because we have been a longstanding customer, we've started at a lower rate, but if we were incoming above that $500 threshold, we would have been at a higher rate. But I think all in all, we will be paying about what we would have been paying this year, and then we'd be at a 3% increase annually for COLA.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Then all those in favor of the agreement with Rec Desk for Parks and Recreation Management Software in an amount not to exceed $7,500, subject to city attorney approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next up, we have an award of contract to Boley Tree and Landscape for tree removals and stump grinding in an amount not to exceed $120,400, subject to city attorney approval of any associated contracts.
This is Madden. I'll move approval of the award of contract to Boley Tree and Landscape for tree removals and stump grinding in an amount not to exceed $120,400, subject to city attorney approval of any associated contracts.
This is Baines, I'll second.
Any questions, discussion on this one?
I have one.
Alder Madden, yeah.
Yeah, so it was great to see where all of these trees are on the map, but were a lot of them lost due to storm damage? Was this trees that we removed? I remember I was president of our condo association at one point, and I know that removing trees and stumps is pricey, and Boley actually did the work, so I know they're a good company, but I'm just curious as to where all of these trees are.
Yeah,
missing.
so in the fall of 2024, and then starting in the spring of 2025, we did a complete street tree inventory. So of all trees in our streets and parks. And as part of that inventory, the trees were assigned a priority rating as well as a condition and a recommendation for maintenance activity. So these are trees identified in that inventory as recommended for removal. Typically, they're dead, dying. They have a structure that can't be improved with pruning, so they're therefore recommended for removal. And we have later tonight the consultant that did that inventory presenting to council. So if you have further questions on that, she's going to be able to answer those.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions, Mayor Haniron?
Thank you. So that was one question I had. Why are they being removed? So thank you for that. Will they be replaced? And if so, when?
Yes. When? As part of the forestry management plan, it identifies a capacity for tree planting within the city of about 100 to 120 trees per year. The amount of trees that we'll remove, that we've already removed in 2025 and that we will be removing in 2026 is going to outpace that. If you look at the vacancies or the tree planting spots that we have in the city, it outpaces that 120 figure by quite a bit. So what we'd like to do is propose a rotation around the city where we're targeting certain areas per year and concentrating that 100 trees in each of those areas. So we've got a rough plan of that, we'll debut it to our Park Rec Forestry Commission for guidance, feedback, approval, and we'll work through the city systematically to replant.
Okay, and then how will homeowners be notified about the tree that, assuming these are street trees, how will the homeowners be notified?
Every one of these trees that's adjacent to a property received a door hanger notification when we mark the trees for removal. So that marking is a green dot on the base of the tree on the street side. And then homeowners received a notification. For these, I believe I sent a list to the alder whose district this was in, so they had that information as well.
Okay.
And I'll continue to do that as we have additional removals coming up.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, all those in favor of awarding the contract to Boley Tree and Landscape for tree removals and stump grinding in an amount not to exceed $120,400, subject to city attorney approval of any associated contracts, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And our last agreement is a grant agreement and land use restriction agreement with the Wisconsin Department of Administration for the non-state grant program, subject to city attorney approval.
This is Baines. I'll move approval of the grant agreement and land use restriction agreement with the Wisconsin Department of Administration for the non-state grant program, subject to city attorney approval.
This is Madden, I'll second.
And questions on this?
I just have a quick clarifying question. So this is a grant for $200,000 for the Precy Park shelter. Is that money that we have already paid and that are being refunded through the grant program?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
reimbursement grant.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I read that correctly. Thank you, Bill.
Any other questions? All those in favor of the grant agreement and land use restriction agreement with the Wisconsin Department of Administration for the non-state grant program, subject to city attorney approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And next thing up and under miscellaneous is consideration and appointment of a building inspection manager and reorganization of the building inspection division. And from what I understand, we need a motion to approve this position. Comes from finance and personnel.
So I'll attempt to make a motion. I just am not entirely sure how to word it. So this is bad and I will move approval of the appointment of the building inspection manager and the reorganization of the building inspection division. Is that enough? Perfect.
Or do you need a specific?
Like, do you need specific names
If
and
you
then under
just-
planning division or?
Yes, it'd be appointment of Mr. Placido Rivera as the building inspector manager
Correct.
and reorganization of that division into the planning
the
and
planning
community development department.
Yeah. So that would be my motion.
This is Baines. I'll second.
Okay. So the motion is to appoint Mr. Placido Rivera as the building inspection manager and reorganizing the building inspection division under planning and community development.
Yes.
Questions or comments on this? Alder Madden?
Just one, was the moving the building inspection department under planning and management, is that to just like kind of streamline some processes? Is that what we're hoping to see?
Yeah, the whole
Okay.
point of that is to have a one point of service continuum from idea that the developer, property owner, whatever has for a project, all the way through actual construction and inspection and final occupancy. So all those different pieces from the plan review standpoint would all be within one department.
Okay. Is that an additional work burden on the planning department?
I don't want to speak for the planning director herself, but it's going to kind of do both things. Because I mean, with having that its own separate department previously, there was just a lot more kind of bringing into the fold type of things on projects. Whereas if it's naturally part of the department, they're in the this individual will be in the conversations from the start
Okay,
on projects. So, you know, over time, I think there'll become a flow of just understanding what building inspection information can be provided to a developer or an applicant on the front end of a project, which ultimately lead to a more efficient process for that applicant.
great. Thank you, Brian.
Any other questions, or discussion?
I know that my constituents will be happy that we finally have a permanent person here.
It's, yeah, it's good that we've found someone to fill this spot. So someone very well qualified, it seems.
Yeah, I was gonna
too.
say, not just like someone to fill it, but someone with a really great resume. So I was excited
Right.
to see that too.
Yeah,
Specifically, but the skill set that, you know, I think would help given the volume of projects we have in the community.
yeah.
Indeed.
All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next up, discussion and consideration and potential action on the adoption of the Middleton Urban Forestry Plan. Do we have someone who wants to start this discussion, or do we need any action from finance for this one? Guesses. Because this is coming to council as well.
Yes, we'll have the presentation on the council agenda for tonight. And we put it on finance just more as an FYI. It does have a budget component, just with our operations for forestry and the plan moving forward. I think it's important to put on this agenda tonight for you guys to review. If you had any questions on how it relates to our future budgets, we're happy to answer any questions, but it will be at council presented there tonight. And I did put a memo together just outlining this project as well.
And as far as the process, I think there could be a motion from this committee to recommend acceptance of the report. I don't know that that's required for this type of item, if you just want to wait until the council meeting.
Okay. Does anybody have questions about the plan?
I don't, not as far as finances. As far as finance goes, I'm comfortable just moving it in front of the council and having it as a council discussion. I didn't have any specifics on the memo.
I agree with that stance.
Okay. So nobody feels like we need to do a motion either, or just leave it up to council?
Yeah, I don't think we necessarily need one. We'll have we'll have the presentation and then I think a larger council discussion in which more people can weigh in. I didn't have anything specific from a finance perspective or personnel perspective.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Then we will move on to potential cancellation of the July 21st Finance and Personnel Committee meeting. I believe a couple of us will be out of town, which makes it hard. So the idea is to move any business that needs to be done to our following one in August. And any other financial needs or things that need to be done could be done at council potentially. I think is kind of where we were going with this.
Okay.
So do we need a motion to cancel it?
I think that would be
officially?
appropriate,
Okay.
to have a motion to cancel rather than reschedule. And, just, I think as part of the understanding, we would have the audited bills that would go straight to council. We'll defer as much as we can till the next meeting, but if there's a time sensitive bid or quote or agreement, that might need to go straight to council as well.
Well, I will make the motion then to cancel our July 21st, 2026 Finance and Personnel Committee meeting and not reschedule that meeting. Instead, we will forward any related or time-sensitive materials to the common council meeting on that same evening.
This is Baines, I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to cancel the July 21st meeting. Any other discussion on that? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. And that gives us some time for our budget kickoff. We'll leave this up to Bill.
Yeah, thank you. I'll get this loaded up. Yeah, we typically start with a budget kickoff presentation in July, and the purpose of that is to provide some updates on our context, kind of our financial situation, talk about major issues that we anticipate coming up for the current budget, give kind of a preview of what we know at this point in the year. We do this in July because we give direction to departments and start sending out budget worksheets to departments later in July. Those are due back mid to late August. So it's an opportunity to provide an update to the committee as well as get any feedback from the committee that you'd like us to pass on to the departments before they start working on putting their budgets together. I've got a couple areas that I'll go through here. I tend to move a little quickly just to try to cover everything, but if there are questions, please stop me and I'll try to leave a little time for questions at the end as well. So I'll be starting with an overview of our budget and structure, updates on our current situation, talk about those major issues that I see for this budget year, including the impact of the TIF District Number 3 closure, and then end with the process and the calendar and next steps. So looking at the overall structure of our budget, I like to include a reminder in there that even though we spend a lot of time during the budget process talking about the general fund and the capital projects, our budget is a collection of a number of different funds that all have their own special purposes. And with governmental accounting, things are organized by fund where there are unique revenues that come in that are to be used for items specific within that area. Within the category of our governmental funds, we have our general fund where most of our operating departments are located. We also have special revenue funds that are used to account for unique revenues. A good example is the tourism department where we have a portion of room tax revenue that comes in and is restricted and used for tourism activities. We have our capital projects fund, which includes our general borrowing capital projects as well as TIF capital projects. And then we have our debt service fund, which is funded by property taxes to make principal and interest payments on debt that we've issued for capital. We also have a number of what are called business type funds. These are accounted for more similarly to how a private business would be accounted for, and funds are primarily paid by ratepayers. So we have our water, sewer, stormwater utilities, golf course, airport, and then we also have a smaller Middleton Utility District related to future utility planning in Bishops Bay. So then turning to our general fund, which is our largest fund and where a lot of our budget decisions are made. Looking at the revenue picture, the largest revenue by far is the property tax. Roughly 60% of the general fund revenue comes from property taxes. Intergovernmental, which includes various state aids for things like shared revenue, state road aids, fire aids, other specific assistance from the state, that makes up about 15% of the budget. And that leaves everything else that makes up 1/4 of our revenue. So that's everything from department fees, things like ambulance fees, charges for services, fines, interest income, all of that other revenue. So given that we have property tax levy limits and the intergovernmental aids are controlled by the state, that leaves just a piece of the pie that is directly controllable by the city. Looking at the expenditure side of the general fund, the graph on the left shows the breakdown by major function. So our largest function is public safety. That includes police, fire, EMS, as well as building inspection, which is considered a public safety because it's for the promotion of health and benefits for residents and building occupants. After public safety, the next two largest areas are public works, as well as general government that includes various administrative functions, finance, IT, administration, city clerk, et cetera. And then we have the other funds making up the remaining balance of the general fund. Looking at type of expenditures, personnel costs are our largest expenditure in our operating funds. Wages and benefits make up roughly 60% of the general fund expenditures. 30% is operating, which is everything from professional services, supplies, fuel, utilities, et cetera. We have transfers of about 9%. That includes the transfers to the library, the youth center, and our transit fund. And that leaves us a small amount of about 1% for contingency and reserves. And this is our current approved budget for 2026. In total, it's about a $100 million budget. Of that, general fund is 27 million. We have a couple large TIF districts, including TIF 3, and with the final payouts for TIF 3, that's why that amount is so large this year at 36 million, and then our various utilities. I did want to just note that when we look at the property taxes, it's really only two funds that are directly funded by the property tax, our general fund and debt service. And then we also have TIF increment that comes into our TIF districts. All of those other funds are funded through other revenue sources.
Bill, may I ask, could someone click on the OK where it says this meeting is being live streamed, so that'll go away?
Oh,
Just in case there's other stuff that might be obscured.
are you able to?
Thank you.
Thank you. This slide is something we like to look at each year as part of the budget process. This is a comparison of the city portion of the tax rate on an equalized basis. So this factors out differences in assessment levels and whether or not a community's had a revaluation recently. And this looks at the most recent tax year, so the bills that went out last December for this current budget year. And City of Middleton continues to compare favorably. We're on the low end of this graph. Highest local tax rates are in Stoughton, Madison, Sun Prairie. The only cities and villages in Dane County that have a lower local tax rate are Waunakee, Verona, and Windsor. So I think important context to put it in mind. Certainly it's beneficial for our residents to have a lower city portion of the tax rate. However, because of levy limits, that also means that we are locked in at a lower level than perhaps some of our other peer municipalities that had higher levies and higher rates before levy limits went into effect. So shifting from that high level overview of what our budget looks like, I want to get into some of the details looking at going into this year for the 2027 budget. And I thought I'd start by looking at a summary of our financial strengths and challenges. And these are very similar to some of the items that Moody's noted in the recent credit opinion for our borrowing this year. First of all, starting with our strengths. Middleton has very strong and healthy reserve levels. We've recently amended our fund balance policy to increase the target threshold. We've been consistently adding to our undesignated fund balance within the general fund. We've assigned funds for specific things, and our utilities also have strong cash balances. We also have relatively low long-term liabilities, and that includes both our debt service, which we've been paying down the actual amount of debt outstanding for several years now. And that also includes things like our pension liability. We benefit from being a part of the Wisconsin retirement system, which is one of the best funded pension systems within the state. And we have relatively low obligations for what's called other post-employment health benefits. So overall, compared to other municipalities in Wisconsin and throughout the country, we have a relatively low level of outstanding liabilities. We have stable revenue sources. I'd say that that's in some ways both a pro and a con. The good news is that the property tax and state aids are not subject to wild fluctuations. It also means we don't see as much upside as some communities in other states might, where they have income taxes and sales taxes that grow more rapidly, but we're also protected from sharp declines for most of those revenue sources. We have strong TIF districts, and especially with the closure of TIF district number 3, that provides great opportunities going into the next budget. And because of the growth of our tax base and that we've been paying down debt over time, we have significant available borrowing capacity. Challenges are primarily on the side of revenues, of limitations on our ability to raise revenue. As we know, we're subject to property tax levy limits that are limited to generally net new construction. Limited local revenue options. We don't have options for local sales tax, local income tax, and very few other options that are available. We're continuing to see impacts of inflation, both on the operating side as well as personnel costs. As a growing community, there are increasing service demands, and we're continuing to experience challenges with some of our older facilities and maintenance, both in terms of cost as well as space limitations. I did want to highlight a few of these just to give a little bit more detail of some of those strengths and challenges. This slide looks at our unassigned fund balance. So this is our reserve within the general fund, essentially our rainy day and cash flow fund. And as you can see, over the last 5 years, we've added to that consistently, primarily taking advantage of surpluses at the end of the year, and especially the last couple of years, well, that's been driven primarily by interest income. And we're now at 33% of the next year budget funded in that unassigned fund balance. And we've set a target range of 25 to 40%. So I think that puts us in a really good place financially. In addition to that unassigned fund balance, we also have set aside fund balance for specific purposes. Some of those are items that are projects that are underway, such as the revaluation work that was started last year and is being carried forward and will be completed this year. Carryovers for things like the ERP implementation, for some of the pruning work that we talked about earlier, and contingency. We also had an additional transfer to the transit fund that was taken from part of the surplus from last year. The last 3 items on here are more long-term items, and this line for compensated absences, that is representing our estimate of what our future liability is for employees that are accumulating accrued sick and vacation leave and will be eligible for payouts when they retire or otherwise separate from the city. And with the conclusion of 2025, for the first time, we have that fully funded, where 100% of our calculated liability is set aside as that assigned fund balance. So that's a great position to be in, that we have those reserves in place to pay those obligations when they're needed. We've also been setting aside capital reserves to help pay for future fire apparatus purchases through the fire district, as well as ambulance replacements for EMS. So that provides us another tool of capital, and hopefully can reduce borrowing for those items when they come forward. I'd mentioned that we've been paying down our outstanding debt, and that has been a strategy of the city over the past several years, that as some of our existing facility debt is being retired, we're creating capacity, and that sets us up for the opportunity to look at borrowing for future projects, such as the community campus or other projects in the future. And our percentage of legal debt capacity, which is governed by the state, that's based on our city's equalized value. And as the value of the community goes up, that legal debt capacity goes up. So we are now down to under 15% utilization of our legal debt capacity. Flipping over to some of the challenges, the number one challenge we talk about every year is property tax levy limits, which are generally limited to net new construction. This chart looks at the history of net new construction over the past 6 years. We've generally been a little bit under 2%. We are anticipating that we will hit 2% or maybe slightly over this year due to some of the additional building activity that's been taking place over the last year. But to put that into context, even at 2%, that only is about $300,000 of available additional revenue on a $27 million general fund budget. So that is not even enough to cover just inflationary increases for our budget. And that's illustrated by this next slide, which looks at over the last several years, if we look at the change in population and the change in inflation represented by the Consumer Price Index, those 2 bars together, compared to the blue line, which is our net new construction percentage. And as you can see, in 2019, 2020, 2021, they were relatively close. We saw a big jump in 2022 and 2023. Certainly that's when inflation spiked up following the pandemic. We also saw increases in our population growth during that time period. And we were seeing that net new construction was not close to covering our increase in service demands and costs. Inflation has come down somewhat, but still remains elevated. And for the last 3 years, we're still seeing a large gap between net new construction and those increased costs of services, both through population growth as well as inflation. Then looking to 2027 on the personnel cost, this graph is from the Employment Cost Index, which is a measure that looks at changes in employment, wages and benefits. It looks at both private industry and government. This is a national statistic. But these graphs show over time those changes with private industry represented by the red line, government in the blue. We saw a large spike following the pandemic and during the pandemic around 2022, with private sector leading and government following. We have seen that start to come down in the last year. And for both government and private sector, from the most recent data as of March of this year, it seems like it may be stabilizing at about a 3.5% increase. We use this information to help determine our target rate for the annual cost of living adjustment for our budget. We'll also want to look at other neighboring communities and our local situation rather than just this national data, but it gives us a good starting point. So right now, based on these trends and where we are with our existing collective bargaining agreements, I would say we're probably looking at somewhere in that range of a 3 to 3.5% as we look at cost of living going into the next budget. And then the last item I had under there under challenges was the aging of city facilities, as we all know very well. This looks at just some of the major city facilities and the year that they were constructed. So our most recent facilities are the MOC, police station, EMS, also the fire station for the Middleton Fire District was constructed around that same time, as well as the golf course clubhouse. Older facilities are the Aquatic Center and of course the library, City Hall and Senior Center that are being discussed as part of the community campus project. So I just want to point that out, that I think it puts into context that those are areas where it would make sense to be next logical investment in city facilities as we consider this budget as well as the community campus project. Looking at a couple revenue sources, one of the ones that has fluctuated the most is investment income. We saw for a number of years that interest rates were very close to zero for short-term interest rates, and our investment income was well under $500,000 per year in the general fund. We've seen an increase the most recent 3 years, and especially in 2025, we saw a very strong investment income with almost $2 million of investment income in the general fund. This orange line represents the average over this time period. That average is about 700,000. As we budgeted for 2026, we have a budget of just over $1 million. While I think that number is probably reasonable for 2026 and potentially even 2027, at some point, interest rates are likely to change. And so that's something that we need to be mindful of, that if things do start to get down closer to that average, that we may need to plan to scale back that investment income number within the budget. And in talking with finance professionals across the state and at some of the conferences I go to, one of the best practices that's discussed is budget for investment income at kind of a base level or perhaps an average level. And in years where you're getting significant income above that, use it for non-recurring expenses. And we've done that to some extent, such as last year when we put a lot of that into fund balance or into those assigned fund balances. But I think that is something that we need to consider, that even at the $1,050,000 level, we may want to start over time phasing that down somewhat closer to where our average has been. Before I transition to the specific issues for this year, are there any questions and kind of that background or context information?
Yes, I have a question. Why was investment income negative for 2022?
Good question. So our practice with investments is to buy and hold to maturity. We're not actively trading. However, by government accounting rules, we are required to mark to market. And in situations like we experienced where there was a rapid rise in interest rates, the value of investments for the paper value in some cases went negative. So we had an unrealized loss in that year. Because we hold to maturity, we didn't have an actual realized loss, but that is something we needed to reflect on our financial statements.
Okay, and by that same logic, if interest rates go down and the value of our holdings go up, do we also count that, I assume, as income?
Yes, we would. And
Okay.
part of that $2 million number for last year reflects that we have had some gain in value in our investments.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I'll continue on. So this first slide kind of poses the question, what is the story of the budget? And one of my colleagues from another municipality always says, every budget has a story. And I thought that's a really good way to look at it. So as I look at back at 2026, what was the story of that budget? And I feel like we accomplished a lot of things as a city in that budget. We addressed employee compensation through the non-union compensation study. We have a new collective bargaining agreement for the police department. We tried to address employee retention. We also added several staff positions to kind of address critical needs. And that was done in part through an additional recycling fee as well as some additional revenue. So I felt like that kind of was addressing some of our most critical needs. As I look to what would the story be for the 2027 budget, I think this is really an opportunity with this budget.
Oh, oh my God, I'm about to go.
Apologies for that. See if I can get back to the presentation. Okay. Apologize for the formatting on this slide that got a little messed up, but as I was saying, 2027, I think, presents us with a real opportunity to look at addressing some issues for the longer term. And that is primarily because of the closure of TIF District Number 3 and the opportunities that provides. I think then in 2028, unless there are major changes at the state level, we would likely be looking at more of a cost to continue budget. And in 2029 or at some point in the future, we may need to look at either a levy limit referendum or some other alternative revenue source to try to address those increasing costs over time. See if I can get this back in presentation. There we go. 2027, for personnel costs, we have the police contract at a 3% COLA. As I mentioned, for non-union, we're likely trending at between a 3 and 3.5%. We have pretty well set numbers. We have a cap for health insurance. So we have a good idea of what our costs are going to be going into 2027. We have the closure of TIF District Number 3, and I'm going to just skip ahead on a couple slides to get to this point. I really want to talk about what I see those advantages being for the closure of TIF 3, and primarily 3 areas. First, that we will have an increase to our non-TIF tax base. TIF District Number 3 represents 14% of the total value of the city compared to our non-TIF tax base. And when that becomes available, that will give us an opportunity to both take on additional operating costs as well as additional borrowing potentially, and still keep our overall tax rate constant. The second major advantage is the final payment that will be received at the end of the TIF. So the TIF currently has a strong fund balance. We'll be paying the remaining obligations of that district, escrowing the funds that we need to pay those future obligations. And with that, there'll be a balance of roughly $12 million. And we're estimating that the city's share will be about $3.3 million as a one-time payment. So that represents funds that are available for one-time, non-recurring costs. Should not be used for funding ongoing positions, but it can be used for things such as capital or other one-time projects. And then the final item is the levy limit adjustment. That with the closure of the TIF district, we will receive an additional levy limit adjustment on top of net new construction, which we're estimating to be about a 7% adjustment, or about 1.1 million. So in addition to that roughly 300,000 that's available from net new construction, we potentially would have another $1.1 million available. And that gives us an opportunity to address some kind of one-time structural issues with our budget, as well as make some strategic decisions about what are the key positions or other costs that we want to build into our operating budget for the future. And then there's a couple slides that go into a little detail on each one of these a little bit more. This first on the additional tax base is referencing some of the projection work that's been done on the community campus planning, that we can take advantage of that additional tax base to increase the debt service levy and borrowing for that project and still try to keep a constant overall city tax rate. The TIF final payment for that final balance, right now we're projecting at just under $12 million. The city share of that is about 28%. It's based on our share of the total tax bill, which means the city of Middleton payment of about 3.3 million. There would also be payments going to the school district, county, and MATC for their portion. So as I mentioned, that should be used for one-time items, and some options would be looking at architectural and engineering costs for the community campus project to be able to get started with some of those costs without having to borrow right away. Looking at some special capital projects that aren't normally funded through our capital borrowing, or one-time grants, or of course we could use that to offset some of the other capital that we typically would borrow for. And then the final major benefit from that is the levy limit adjustment. And that, as I had mentioned, is about a 7% increase. Doing the math and calculation, that's about an additional $1.1 million that would be available. And just as a starting point for discussion, we'd put together this slide that talks about some of the items that could be considered and should be considered for that levy limit adjustment. And the first several of these are items that are opportunities to address kind of structural issues built into our budget. For several years, we've had what's called an abated debt adjustment. Won't get into all the details of that right now, but basically it's an offset where we can apply some additional levy limit adjustment related to debt. We want to phase that out. This would be a good time to do that. We have some items from the comp study and some positions that were funded mid-year, which we did in anticipation of knowing the TID would be closing. We need to budget for those for the full year in 2027. We may want to look at building in some downtown maintenance and other items that previously were funded by TID 3 that could be moving over to be funded through the general fund, potentially in the ballpark of 100,000. If we want to consider starting to phase down some of our investment income, we could address that, look at our contingency levels. So all of these are open for discussion during the budget, of course, but just as a starting point, that potentially looks at about 700,000. That would still leave potentially around 400,000 of available for either addressing key positions or other key items that we want to try to build into the operating budget. So just kind of wrapping up where we are on the process. As I mentioned, departments will be working on their budgets and submitting them in August. We will review those for accuracy and then have meetings with the mayor and administration. We'll collectively work on putting together a proposed budget, which will then come to the finance committee at the last meeting in September and into October for discussions. And then we'd be looking for council action on the budget in November. And these are kind of laying out the meeting dates that we had identified in our calendar. So no, that doesn't leave a lot of time, but I would be happy to answer any final questions either now, or if there are follow-up questions after the meeting, feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you, Bill. That very detailed as usual. So I think it's very helpful too. So do you guys have any questions at this point? And seeing none, next item are future agenda items. Any suggestions for future agendas? Obviously, we're getting into budget season. So
Yeah.
We'll have a lot of budget stuff coming up and
It's plenty for me.
yeah. Anything that you guys want addressed in the meantime, or any detail on any of the things that Bill had just mentioned too, if something more specific. If
No, that was a really excellent breakdown.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay. Then we've reached the end of our agenda, so we are adjourned at 6:54. Thank you.